The Cavite Mutiny that took place on January 20, 1872, was a brief uprising of 200 Filipino troops and workers at the Cavite arsenal that served as an excuse for Spanish repression of the rapidly growing Philippine nationalist movement. In an ironic twist, the harsh reaction of the Spanish authorities ultimately served to advance the nationalist cause. The mutiny was quickly crushed, but the Spanish regime, led by reactionary Governor Rafael de Izquierdo, exaggerated the incident and used it as an excuse to crack down on Filipinos calling for governmental reform. A number of Filipino intellectuals were apprehended and charged with collaborating with the mutineers. Following a brief trial, 3 priests were publicly executed: Jose Burgos, Jacinta Zamora, and Mariano Gomez. The 3 were later martyred for the cause of Philippine independence.
These are the second-hand accounts of the Cavite Mutiny that we have compiled.
Father Agapito Ichigoyan. He was the last Augustinian recollect casualty of Philippine Revolution in Cavite. Likewise, slain with him were 3 Augustinian friars, Candeñas, Piernavieja, and Rivero. He returned to the Philippines a few months later, claiming that his account was given to him by a fellow friar, which is Father Cipriano Navarro. The account of Ichigoyan does not name the alleged impersonator of Burgos, but he is described as a Franciscan. Piernavieja's account, on the other hand, attributes the deed to a Father Claudio del Arco, whom he does not identify further, but who was a Recoleto parish priest in Santa Cruz, Zambales.
Chris Antoinette Piedad Pugay graduated as the school valedictorian after garnering the highest GPA among the graduating students for the year 2011, a first for a foreign student of the Sogang University Graduate School of International Studies. She wrote an article and generously accepted by the National Historical Commission of the Philippines because she was able to present the 2 sides of what really happened during the Cavite Mutiny. She was also able to present evidences that would shed light to all the questions that every Filipino historian has been thinking and try to re-examine about. The historical source was written way back in September 5, 2012 and currently posted in the page of the National Historical Commission of the Philippines. This was made possible by Chris Antoinette Piedad Pugay, the writer of The 2 Phases of the 1872 Cavite Mutiny. The article posted is in Manila, Philippines, that is 33.6 kilometers away from Cavite, that is almost 1 hour and 9 minutes from the place of publication in Calao Street, Ermita, Manila.
Pedro Alejandro Paterno y de Vera Ignacio wrote Synopsis de la Historia de Filipinas. He was a politician in the Philippines who was well known for being a traitor. He was also a poet and novelist. He was Maximo Paterno's son. He was deported to the Marianas in 1872, despite the fact that young Pedro was a student in Spain at that time. Pedro Paterno published many works purposing to be historical during the Spanish era, but the vast majority of them dealt with the pre-Hispanic Philippine history. He published this in the 19th century to make a brief mention of the events of the 1872 Cavite Mutiny while discussing the revolts of 19th century. The treatment, however, is limited to the few scattered paragraphs in support of his assertion that all of 19th century revolts were reformist in nature, not separatist in nature, and aim at restoring control of Filipino affairs within the larger frameworks of Spanish sovereignty. Even though Pedro Paterno's location is far from where the mutiny occurs, because he is in Marianas at that time, he still supports his writings with evidence gathered through his father, Maximo Paterno.
Father Antonio Piernavieja, the document he wrote, admits to and condemns a variety of crimes and abuses allegedly committed by the friars, beginning with the period preceding the Cavite Mutiny. The execution of the 3 priests is blamed on friars' intrigues, according to all accounts. Dr. Trinidad Hermenegildo Pardo de Tavera. Dr. Trinidad Hermenegildo Pardo de Tavera is a Filipino scholar, and researcher who wrote the Filipino version of the Cavite bloodbath. He is a Filipino physician and historian, an outstanding Filipinologist who published notable scholarly works in the fields of Oriental and Philippine studies, including language, anthropology, folklore, and so on. His training and credentials as a doctor are extensive. According to him, the incident was merely a mutiny by native Filipino soldiers and laborers at the Cavite arsenal who were dissatisfied with the loss of their privileges. His account was originally written for the official report of the 1903 census, as part of General Survey of Philippine History.
These are the evidences gathered from the second-hand accounts that we gathered.
According to Dr. Trinidad D. Tavera, the incident was merely a mutiny by native Filipino soldiers and laborers at the Cavite arsenal, who were dissatisfied with the loss of their privileges. Tavera indirectly blamed Governor Izquierdo's cold-blooded policies, such as the abolition of privileges for workers and native armies members of the arsenal, and the prohibition of the establishment of School of Arts and Trades for Filipinos, which the general saw as a cover-up for the formation of a political club. Tavera believed that the Spanish friars and Izquierdos used the Cavite Mutiny as a powerful lever to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines by magnifying it as a full-fledged conspiracy involving not only the native army but also the residents of Cavite and Manila, and most importantly, the native clergy. Fearing that their influence in the Philippines would slowly decline, the friars exploited the incident and presented it to the Spanish government as a vast conspiracy organized across the archipelago with the goal of destroying Spanish sovereignty.
Sadly, Tavera confirmed that the Madrid government came to believe that the scheme was true without making an attempt to investigate the true fact or the scope of the alleged revolution reported by Izquierdo and the friars. Echegoyen stated that he learned the truth from a fellow friar. He claimed that the heads of the friar orders met to discuss how to get rid of Burgos and other native clergy leaders, and that they decided to implicate them in a seditious plot. A Franciscan friar disguised as a secular priest was sent to Cavite with a large sum of money to stir up mutiny, and he negotiated with Zaldúa to blame Burgos for the uprising. Following that, the head of the friars order used a large bribe, una fuerte suma de dinero, to persuade the Governor-General that Burgos should be arrested, tried, and sentenced. According to Pierna Vieja, a certain Fray Claudio del Arceo, disguised as Father Burgos, went to Cavite to spread the idea of an uprising. When the mutiny was put down, the friars put pressure on the Governor-General through his secretary and a lady with a lot of clout, as well as a gift of 40,000 pesos. The revolt of 1872 in particular, the friars conjured up an insurrection in Cavite, when in reality, it was nothing more than a military mutiny based on Paterno.
The account of Paterno in the succeeding pages is a thinly veiled panegyric of himself and his accomplishments, in which he appears as the true inspiration of Rizal and the soul of the late 19th century nationalist movement. The incident was a mere mutiny by the native Filipino soldiers and laborers of the Cavite arsenal who turned out to be dissatisfied with the abolition of their privileges. The Spanish friars and Izquierdo used the Cavite mutiny as a powerful lever by magnifying it as a full-blown conspiracy involving not only the native army but also include residents of Cavite and Manila, and more importantly, the native clergy to overthrow the Spanish government in the Philippines. The central government in Madrid announced its intention to deprive the friars of all the powers of intervention in matters of civil government and the direction and management of educational institutions.
General Izquierdo introduced rigid and strict policies that made the Filipinos move and turn away from Spanish government out of disgust. The central government failed to conduct an investigation on what truly transpired, but relied on reports of Izquierdo and the friars and the opinion of the public. The execution of Gomburza was a blunder on the part of the Spanish government, for the action severed the ill feelings of the Filipinos, and the event inspired Filipino patriots to call for reforms and eventually independence.